briefly today the Victorian children. So poor children and rich children. We're going to look at the differences between them both. Briefly look into work for Victorian children. Toys and entertainments for both classes. The Victorian age in British history is named after Queen Victoria, who was Britain's queen from 1837 until 1901. What was life like for Victorian children? There were big differences between the two classes. In homes, schools and entertainments, there was no TV like today, no computers, no central heating, no cars, until the very last few years of the Victorian era at least. There was no air travel unless you went up into a balloon. Many children went to work, not to school. Welcome to the great Victorian world. It is time to find out how children, your great-great-great-grandparents perhaps, lived more than 100 years ago. Many Victorian children were poor and worked to help their families. Thought that this was strange or cruel. Families got no money unless they worked, and most people thought that children were good for work. The Industrial Revolution created new jobs in factories and mines. Many of these jobs were first done by children because children were cheap. A child was paid less than an adult, just a few pennies a week for some work. Many children started work at the age of 5, the same age as children start school today. They went to work as soon as they were big enough. Even a tiny child could feed the chickens. Older brothers and sisters took small children to work, perhaps to a factory. Other children worked from home, doing jobs such as washing, sewing, and sticking labels on bottles or making brushes. Children worked on farms, in homes as servants, and in factories, or chimney sweeps. Children often did jobs that required small size and nimble fingers, but they also pushed heavy coal trucks along tunnels in coal mines. Boys went to sea as boy sailors, and girls went into service as housemaids. Children worked on city streets, selling things such as flowers, matches or ribbons. Boys swept the roads and cleared the rubbish left by horses that pulled carts and carriages. Who went to school? At the start of the 19th century, very few children went to school. Most poor children worked. If they went to school, their families lost the money that they earned. There were some good schools for boys, for example, grammar schools and public schools. Only richer families could afford to pay the school fees, though. Some schools did give free places to poor boys. Poor girls did not go to school in the Victorian age, meaning that they had little education. Girls from wealthy families would usually be taught at home by a governess. Sometimes wealthy girls had to attend boarding schools. I should add that poor girls did go to school, more towards the middle and the end of the Victorian age, but at the start it was very, very rare for a poor girl to have an education. What was the Victorian classroom like? There were maps and perhaps pictures on walls. There would be a globe for geography lessons and an abacus to help with sums. Children sat in rows and the teacher sat at a desk facing the class. At the start of the Victorian age, most teachers were men, but later many women trained as teachers too. Children wrote on slates with chalk. They wiped the slate clean by spitting on it and rubbing in their coat, sleeve or their finger. Slates could be used over and over again. For writing on paper, which was more rare, children used a pen with a metal nib dipped into an inkwell. These were mostly used by richer children. Sunday schools were run by churches to teach children about the Christian faith. Journalist Robert Raikes started the first Sunday school for poor children in Gloucester in 1780. Bragged schools were schools for poor children. One of the first was started in Portsmouth by a shoemaker named John Pounds. Older children helped the younger learn. Bragged schools were often in one room of a house or in an old barn. From 1833, factory owners were supposed to provide at least 2 hours of education every day for childwork, but this didn't often happen. Reformers campaigned for new laws to improve working conditions for children and gave children the opportunity for schooling. In 1870, Parliament said that there had to be a school in every town and village. School boards of local people built and ran new schools. Families paid a few pennies a week to send their children, though not all children went to school. In the 1860s, a farmer might pay 6p for a week for one child. A labourer who earned much less only paid 2p. By 1880, the law said that all children aged 5 to 10 must go to primary school, so they would at least receive a basic education. Playtime. Where did the Victorian children play? Although many children worked in Victorian times, they still had time to play. Outdoors, most Victorian children played in the street or in fields and woods. Not many families had gardens big enough to play in, and there were no children's playgrounds. Rich families had playrooms or nurseries, but poorer children played where they could find space. With 10 or more children often crammed into one or two side was the usual escape. Toys. Toys in rich homes. During the 19th century, factory-made toys, including tin toys and clockwork toys, went to choose from. Train sets, toy soldiers, and doll's houses. Toy fruit, vegetables, and meat, hats and medicine. Other popular toys were alphabets, sailing boats, jigsaw puzzles, and Noah's Ark. In many homes, children were not allowed toys on the For poor children, street fun. Street games. Children shared toys like hoops, marbles, and skipping ropes with friends in the street or in the school playground. They played chasing games such as tag or played catch with balls. If they couldn't afford a proper ball, they made them from rags and bats from pieces of wood. They also played hopscotch. Victorian children were able to play in the street as there was less traffic than today. There were no cars until the 1800s. They crowded around street musicians wearing barrel, which played tunes when the handles were turned. Sometimes barrel organ players had a monkey with them. Books for children. Victorian children were often given books with improving moral lessons about characters with names like Lazy Lawrence and Simple Susan. A favourite story with Charles Kingsley's The Water Babies, about a badly treated chimney boy. There were lots of books written and specially for children, such as Treasure Island, about pirates, Black Beauty, about a horse, and perhaps most famously, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, written in 1865 by Lewis Carroll. It was more common to have bigger families in the Victorian era. Many women had lots of babies. Birth control was not widespread, and few couples used any means of contraception. Childbearing could be dangerous, and many women died in childbirth. Many babies also died from childhood diseases. Queen Victoria herself had 9 children. Her children were called Edward, Alfred, Arthur, Leopold, Victoria, Alice, Helena, Louise, and Beatrice. The royal family became a model for other families. Slum children. In slums, there was no money for toys, nowhere to play except yards and alleys. Many children had to work, while others were too sick or hungry to play. Yet most poor children managed to have some kind of fun. They played with whatever they could find, perhaps dancing or singing, paddling in a stream or climbing trees and lampposts. Richer families lived in large houses with a special room for children called the nursery. This was often at the top of the house. In the nursery, the younger children ate, played, and slept. They were looked after by a woman called the nanny. She took them for walks in the park or went to the zoo. Some rich children saw their parents only twice a day, in the morning and evening, and were looked after mostly by their nanny and the other servants. Most Victorians were taught that children should be seen and not heard. Victorians could make their own entertainment at home. Poorer families enjoyed tunes on a pipe or fiddle. Families played card games or board games or acted out charades. At birthday parties, a special treat was a magic lantern show. An oil lamp, gas lamp, sent a beam of light through a glass lens and onto a screen. This showed enlarged images, perhaps of wild animals or a story. Outings and treats. At the weekend, families might go to the park and listen to a band. Crowds would often gather round the bandstand to enjoy music. Zoos were popular too. Children rode on elephants and camels and watched the lions being fed. At Easter there was maypole dancing, and the May Queen was chosen and paraded through the streets. Poor children looked forward to treats such as these days, and picnics in the park. They were often run by youth organisations such as Band of Hope and the Boys' Brigade. The railways changed people's lives. Families went to the seaside for the day, by train. People who could afford to take it took a week of holiday in the summer. Seaside towns such as Blackpool and Margate became popular resorts. Makers enjoyed things such as enjoying the seaside today. They enjoyed ice cream, fish and chips, riding on the donkeys, paddling, and making sandcastles on the beach. In old photos, you will notice that most people are wearing ordinary clothes, with trousers and skirts rolled up to keep dry. Fun fairs and circuses travelled around the country. Fun fairs had roundabouts, worked by steam engines, slides and swings, coconut shies, shooting galleries, and slideshows with strong. Circuses put on shows in big tents and often paraded into the town on arrival with clowns, elephants, horses and camels. Children laughed at Punch and Judy, a one-man travelling show. Theatre and pantomime. The Victorians loved theatre, and most towns had at least one theatre or music hall. At Christmas, lucky children were taken to the pantomime. This was often a lavish show with exciting special offers: lights, smoke, loud bangs, and live animals. Who could not afford the theatre might get a job in the pantomime as a juvenile dancer or crowds. Children paid a penny to get into a cheap music hall and came out whistling with the latest popular song. So, there we go. That's all I have time for today. Just a brief history lesson for you. Did you learn anything? I hope so. I'll see you next time.